No.
All right, Doug, we're ready.
Okay.
All right.
We'll call the Natural Resource Committee meeting for Wednesday, December 12th to order. The agenda analysis, I'm going to include under old business a discussion of the report I made to the City Commission.
Wonderful.
And it has, of course, the things we've discussed over the last year. But I do feel that we need to take some more formal action than we do because really many of the things we do are going to request the approval by the City Commission. So we want to make sure that we actually take more formal action to get some of these things we've brought forward going. I'm also calling under old business. Last meeting we had a presentation of the dock easement where appropriate cut and fill and mitigation work had not been done by previous owners of people that had a dock easement there, and it's fallen upon the new owners to do that. And I'll be speaking a little bit to that.
Good.
We had comments that came from our group, and I went there and presented them at the meeting, but since we didn't formally endorse those comments, I could not do it as a representative of the Natural Resource Committee, which was a little bit awkward, but I still was able. I would have gotten 2 extra minutes if I were able to do that, but I got the concerns at that, and I'll talk about this is something that went to this Planning Commission and has now been accommodating some of our concerns as the Planning Commission has actually altered some of the things that they were required to do. And you weren't at that meeting, but anyway, so those are things I'm going to bring up under the old business section.
Okay, good.
So, Peter, we've got a presentation coming. I don't think I don't see any other members of the public other than yourself. So we'll go directly into the, is there anything else on the agenda that somebody wants to include before you go ahead? Okay, then we're ready for the presentation.
All right. And I was supposed to have somebody here with me, but they're not here. So just me, I'm afraid. So my name is John Van Staveren. I do recognize some faces. I was here last time, I think, with the Environmental Learning Center, which we worked on, which was quite good, quite successful. Jerry's legacy. So tonight I'm going to be talking briefly about the phase 2 of the Cove development.
As you're going, I imagine as we see these slides, we might want to interrupt the presentation.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, interrupt all the way along. Yeah, definitely.
My answer's so screwed up tonight. Thank you.
All right, so I'm assuming you all know the Cove, probably wandered around there.
Thank you.
The Cove was a quarry.
Before you do that, you might want to talk about the action that the City Commission took in terms of their vote that they made at the previous commission.
Can you say that? Because he was.
You mean the Urban Renewal Commission or the City Commission?
City Commission.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, well, anyway.
I am.
They took action to move it forward, and I think.
And and they have submitted an application for this phase to the Planning Department.
Right.
I do know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they submitted that
Because I'm reviewing it for completeness right now, and the completeness
I
review
used the wrong wording.
due
I
tomorrow.
actually said what they voted on, but anyway, it moved everything formally forward, which is important.
Only get 30 days.
Specifically, I moved the DDA to
Yes.
acceptance, and it includes now high level of mitigation integration, which it wasn't before.
Wasn't before. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'll go over here.
Okay.
You may not be alone.
Oh, okay. Hey, Ryan. You want to come up here?
No.
Oh, God.
Come on, you're on stage. Well, just in case you need to talk about the development.
Now you got to introduce yourself.
Ryan Shera, Deacon Development.
Okay. All right.
So he knows all the details as far as, Commissioner.
And I'm going to ask you both to fill a comment card out once you're finished, just so we know you were here.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Will do. All right, so getting back to this. So I'm assuming you're all familiar with the Cove, walked around it, et cetera. It was a gravel quarry. 1964, I believe, was when it was started to be excavated. And obviously it's connected to the Clackamas River. And the vestige of that past industrial use is that we have steepened sides to the cove, and we have a lot of debris, industrial debris scattered around, et cetera. There was a report that was prepared for the Urban Renewal Commission that was looked at ways to enhance the water quality and the habitat of the cove. And this is one of the graphics from it. I have a few tonight. And it inventoried all the debris, et cetera, that's around the cove. Our phase 2 project is, you can't see that, can you?
They can see it on there.
You can actually see that? Oh,
No, we have.
No, I was just pointing to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd know it, but this was phase 1 down here, the garden apartments, and then this is phase 2. This is what we're dealing with or discussing here tonight. Okay. Doug, it's not, yeah. I'll let you know if it's more exciting than that. Oh, okay. Oh, that'd be good. That'd be great. Thanks. All right. So then other slides of the condition of the cove, which you'll know if you've walked around there, obviously. And this is the peninsula. You can see the edge there. You can see how steep that bank is, and you can see some of the structures that are left in front of it. And then again, some more of the past life of this area and how it was left. So I've been involved with the project for many years because we did the original delineation out there back in 2006. And so go back a long way. We had that approved by the Corps of Engineers, Department of State Lands on site. And this is a graphic that shows the NROD boundary and the ordinary high water. The NROD boundary in 2008, 2009 was a land use decision that reduced the width from 200 down to 50 feet, which it is today.
253?
200 down to 50 feet.
May I ask
50.
why?
You know, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I wasn't involved.
Because our city code, and it's, although it's not a stream, our city code required 200-foot boundaries from on anadromous bearing streams.
Yeah, that was a
And
planning,
so,
because
how's that?
it was a planning commission decision that they made in 2009 to allow a 50-foot buffer from the edge there, and that's what they delineated back then. And that's part of their vested, that's part of their
I believe the
vested
city
master
commission
plan.
never saw that, because if they did, I would have said something.
Well, it's been
And
part
were
of the
we ever
record.
advised about the planning
It's been part of the record for all of the 4 amendments to the master plan that have gone before the planning commission in the last
Oh, that's a query I
7 years.
didn't have. Okay.
Really? Okay.
All right. So this is a proposed development. It is the area you can see here on the east bank, and it's the esplanade, several buildings. And I don't know if you want to just give an overview of what's being proposed along that,
Sure.
in that development.
So our project is actually broken up into 2 phases as well. So from Main Street north, almost right actually where you see the match line 5A and 5B. On south of that line, we've got 5 apartment buildings, roughly about 250 units. And then north of that, we've got 3 buildings, roughly, another 150 units. So about a total of 400 in total between the 2 phases. We've got an esplanade that's roughly shown there that you can see. So just to the east of that orange line, you'll see almost a mirror image line of an esplanade that'll be built up. There's going to be some rough grading and excavation that we need to do for the floodplain. to be in compliance with floodplain cut fill balance requirements. So that'll also be part of the project as well. And then behind the buildings, closer in between the shoreline, in between the buildings and Highway 205 will be new Agnes Avenue and parking.
So there are 5 different things that we'll discuss here, and we won't go into great detail, but certainly can answer questions about them.
Of course, our major concern would be the overlay and what you'll be doing on that. But
Sure.
Of course, we want to see the whole picture too, but that's probably where we'd like to see the more evidence is given.
No doubt. So the first one is enhancement, and I'll get into some detail about that. And that's just along the eastern edge of the cove and right in front of the development. And then there's a construction of the esplanade and recreational paths. There's basically 4 or 3 things that'll impact the NROD, and it's the construction of the esplanade, recreational paths, the expansion of a stormwater facility at the North Park area, and then grading to improve functional lift recreation, basically in the southern area, and also flood storage. And then finally, mitigation for those impacts, unavoidable impacts. We actually really did work with the team to avoid as much impact as possible. And I'm not just saying that, we really did. And one of the overriding reasons, in addition to just needing to do it, obviously, because that's what you have to do, avoid, minimize, and then mitigate. But there was so little mitigation opportunity on the site that we were compelled to just keep it as tight as possible. But it's unavoidable. Even with a 50-foot setback, you're going to have impacts with developing that area. So these aren't great graphics here, but it shows this kind of brownish, orangish area up here is the encroachment. There's the stormwater facility that's going to be expanded. And then there's some improvements that will be impacting the NROD. This green area is the enhancement that's being proposed. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that. And this is the southern part, basically phase 2, or not phase 2, but the lower part here, you can see the green again, which is the enhancement. And then you can see the orange as just a little bit of impact along the outside. And then here, where there's some grading that'll increase the flood storage and also add some recreational, I think there's a sand beach that's going to be placed down there, which although it'll be habitat actually for fish, it'll also be an impact because you can't grow plants there if you've got the sandy beach.
Are those topo lines 5 feet or?
You know, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what
There's a lot of
it's steep. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
For sure. In fact, it's overhanging. You know what it's like out there, obviously. So the first thing I'll talk about is the enhancement. Enhancement, so this report was, like I said, prepared for the Urban Renewal Commission and looked at different ways to enhance water quality and habitat. And one of the things that it recommended was enhancing along that eastern edge of the cove. You can see some of the, again, photos of what the bank looks like, and then some of the structures that are out there. And so what the proposal is to bench back that eastern bank to make it more hospitable for wildlife and more, so it has more connectivity. And that was right out of the report. In doing that, however, there will be these cottonwood trees that'll be removed. So there's about 100 or so trees along that edge that are going to be removed. So the enhancement area, what we're going to do is, like I said, bench that back, make it a gentler slope, and then we're going to plant 778 trees, which is obviously a lot more than is being taken out. And then about 4,000 shrubs, and then we've got native grasses and then native forbs that we're going to be planting.
Can I stop you just a second?
Absolutely,
there?
yep.
I think some of the mitigation's going on to the peninsula. Does that?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that too.
Are these trees included on that your count is on the peninsula? Or
No, this is
Okay.
just the enhancement on the eastern edge. So this is a peninsula here. So we've got those permanent impacts, as I said before, down here. You've got a little band basically along the edge and then some in the northern part of it. And then to mitigate for those and to provide some more mitigation even for the enhancement, we're going to be planting this area. And for anyone who's, I'm sure you've probably all wandered out there and seen what it's like, we're not going to be changing the slopes. That's too much of a job, but we will be taking out the non-natives and putting in native trees and shrubs. So the enhancement plant list is this one. So trees, we'll have 440 trees planted in that area, just over a couple of thousand shrubs, and then again seeded with a native seed mix. And that is the presentation.
Okay, very good. We've got a forester here in the room next to me.
Don't put him on.
And you know something too, but
We love trees.
Yeah, we love trees.
Big and small.
I guess my question, I didn't see any conifers on the list, and I was wondering if, how does Grand Fir do on the shore bank, do you think?
It's a shoreline tree. It's not,
Well,
not
I
in
was
the,
wondering,
not in the water. So,
not on the peninsula because that's pretty high up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was wondering along the bank itself whether you might give some consideration to an appropriate conifer and
Yeah, I mean, because especially you start talking red alder and some of those, they have a very finite lifespan too.
Right.
They start breaking down after
Yeah.
a certain number. I mean, 40 years is a long time, but still, they don't have the lifespan that some other trees do for sure.
Right.
But they are more hardy to wetter areas. But yeah, that would be that's a good question. I think I mean some conifers would be nice to see, but.
I didn't see any western red cedar. Did I miss it?
No, we didn't. We didn't put it in there. We found it to be so finicky and hard to keep going. I don't know if you've had a different experience without a lot of irrigation, and that bank is going to be pretty dry.
Yeah, it'll get baked.
If we weren't in such a dry, warm spell anyway, not to mention western red cedars are
It's a wet
currently
loving
under
tree.
stress throughout their range, so
Right.
that would make it even more difficult out there.
I mean, do you have any issues with conifers along that edge?
What might happen in the very long term if once that's established, say after 5 years? Well, after it gets out of the monitoring period, which we have a 5-year monitoring period for the NROD area.
Sure.
Once it's completed.
Yeah.
And then once that's done and you get the performance guarantee back, and then it's under the property management to keep it in its natural state.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's going to be a homeowners association or something like that, right?
Yep.
And will there be long-term management or some, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there
So,
And it might, species may over time come in there potentially.
we always have volunteers, for sure.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of them would be invasives, I'm sure, but.
And, the thing is, you start out with, I mean, I've done many, many replanting projects. You start out with a suite of plants and you think, these are going to do fine. And then lo and behold, because of, variables in the moisture or the soils or whatever, something else takes over. And it's fine, it does better than what we thought was going to survive. So you're going to have changes for sure. So.
Well, the Grand Fir issue you're discussing along the Willamette, most of the osprey nest trees are Grand Firs, but they're above the ordinary high water line, which most of the site is.
Yes.
Depending on whose ordinary high water line you use, they're still above. They could be planted above that. The other thing was western red cedar. I've seen a lot of areas on the opposite side, of River Resource Museum area, former side. We've got a lot of conifers in there that are now 30 feet tall that are western reds and whatever. It's just we can say microclimate sensitive plant. You need to kind of think about exposures and all that. But
Right.
Can you go back to that slide that showed the whole thing in the, let me see which one it was here. Not that. Let's see. Not that. I'm sorry. That. Okay. The red line is the 50-foot setback from the ordinary high water line.
That's
Is that
right. That's
correct?
the NROD
Okay.
boundary. Correct.
All right. And then a lot of the pictures you showed, Peninsula, for instance, you talked about not doing much modification to slopes there.
Right.
Interior slopes there are very gentle. Exterior slopes are vertical because the river's cut so much. And of course, the east side, I agree with you, is very, very steep because that was their industrial side where they really worked.
Yep.
Is the theme on the east side to continue over into the 7 acres of land on the northwest side, with former River Resource Museum area, Lot 1 and so forth? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I don't, what's the plan for that area? Do you know?
You're talking Lot 1 and.
Right.
Lot 1 clear down to the Willamette. Clackamas, I'm not.
It'll be
Clackamas.
future development, but we have honestly no idea what there at the moment. We've talked hotel, we've talked office, we've talked more apartments. So
There is current talk about Lot 1, if you're not aware of this, becoming another development node with a building or something. Is that right? If it was feasible. Is that
if
correct?
it's feasible. Yeah, we
Right.
still have to deal with the floodplain when we get to that point someday
Okay.
in the future.
I guess my reason for asking is, even though it's vertically oriented slopes, that's the way the Clackamas does things on its main stem. It just cuts the heck out of banks. This was done by man. But there's a lot of areas where, out on that node, Lot 1 and so forth, where it isn't so vertical. I guess my question is, if the intention was to lay back the banks all the way around the 100 acres of land that surround it, or whatever that is, 58, 68, wouldn't that be a major adjustment? That's a huge adjustment to me, because that's where the major trees are at this time, other than the North Spit.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
I'm sorry, so what's your question?
The real question is, if the laying back of slopes like is intended on the east side, and I understand why, but you're not going to do it on the peninsula because it's already got some inclinations that are more gentle. The same thing's true of the north and west side, where there are some slopes that are more gentle and then more vertical orientation. If you lay back the slopes all the way around the west and north side, it would be a huge change.
Be a massive change.
Yeah, it would.
And I'm not so sure it would benefit, personally.
Are you doing that?
No.
No.
Nope.
Not at the moment.
Not at this time.
Right.
Okay. All right.
You say the slopes on the Spit are gentle?
Pardon?
You said the slopes on the Spit are gentle?
Well, yes, on the north spit, on the inside they are. On the outside, they're vertical because the Clackamas has cut them.
I think on the coast side they're pretty
So
steep.
you look,
I've been walked up there.
well, if you look during lower water, there's gentle banks there,
Oh,
which is,
there
I think,
are,
what they're after.
Okay.
But, and then the other question I have, water quality, do you know where you're at on that subject of getting the cove to exchange to the river and vice versa?
No, I don't know about that. It's a good
Okay.
question. I'm not sure where that is. Do you know?
So there's current talk of having a third party doing the mitigation credits for the habitat, in-water habitat. And that would be, but actually I believe the city and a firm called Restore Cap.
Okay, restore cap.
Yeah, Restore Cap are currently in talks right now about how that's going to be completed and when.
Okay. I reported this group that we organized about 20, 25 volunteers and spent about 6 hours and moved, I'm going to say, about 3 to 4 yards of gravel out of an existing channel. And now the cove is exchanging just because we did that. And I'm not saying it was a miracle. It didn't take that much to make that adjustment. If there's still an intention for a deep channel, that will fill in. The river's going to capture that and take it over. If it was a gentle swale,
I mean, given, and I'm thinking of also the people there, these are then condos, not apartments.
These are actually going to be apartments.
Okay, all right. You're talking about homeowners association. I generally.
Yeah, I didn't want to just overcorrect it.
Okay.
Homeowner association, property management.
What do I know?
At the end of the day, there's going to be management.
I'll have a
there.
comment a little bit later on that, but I should have said that. Threw me way off base. You have that that metal stuff that you're probably going to remove from the cove. The one thing I've noticed is that it is used oftentimes as a purchase sites for cormorants. And I've also noticed, though, on the west side of the cove, there's an amount of woody material where they're also drying out and perching there.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I think it's shallow enough, but in the come up here, point that. In the area way up there where the peninsula comes out. Would it be possible to introduce maybe some woody material in there that's big enough to serve as a purchasing area for the waterfowl?
Well, I don't think that's the scope of the NROD application, right? Isn't the NROD all upland plantings?
Yeah, and is above the ordering high water.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, putting
Well, I
it
was saying if you're going to remove the metal material, I presume from the cove. I mean,
We're not doing any in-water work.
yeah, not at
Oh,
this phase. It'll happen,
okay.
but it'll be later phase
Oh, okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
all right.
And also,
What's
one
it
thing
gonna
about
be?
that is that when we do projects, we have to have or anti-poaching devices. National Marine Fisheries Service really don't want us to encourage poaching, because of cormorants fishing the salmon. And so it's just a heads up, The National Marine Fisheries Service would love to take everything out and then leave it out because more fish will live that way.
Yeah, so all the in-water work, so any dredging, the city currently has an active dredging permit. And then any restoration is going to be a joint venture between Restore Cap and the city of Oregon City.
But somehow permanent solution's going to have to be found because I'll tell you, we had that big blue algae bloom back a couple of years ago, and it really
happened this year too.
That cove was great. They were doing marathon swimming in it and so forth. It was a great condition. And then I don't know if it was 2015. My guess it was when that terrible algae bloom hit.
Yep.
And it was a unique year. But this last summer has been almost as hot as that.
Yeah.
And
Well, and it did turn green this year.
Yeah,
I was
so-
observing very closely.
so, yeah, it's really important to have that, to keep the water access from the river going in there. Otherwise, people won't be able to swim in it. And
The amazing thing was when we spent the 4 hours with 20 people throwing about 4 cubic yards. I had a permit from the State Lands Division. They said, you want to do what? Throw rocks, and we did that. They're just taking that out of a slot about 20 feet wide in the hump section that was not letting the tide go in or the water empty. The cove is 5 feet higher than normal now.
Wow.
Because of that rock bar. That dropped it 2 feet, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that
You don't
meant,
need
that meant that the river could start infiltrating. If we look at our map, on the upper portion, way up there, could start infiltrating through the North Spit, which is what it does.
That's right.
It infiltrates through there. So
Yeah.
I really think the fix is pretty simple. If you can allow the infiltration to come in and then exit and the tide to come in and assist,
Good. I'm sure it'll happen.
now, my understanding is the city's going to have a 100-foot easement. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The city is going to have an easement along the bank?
Oh, I'm not sure about the easement, to be honest with you.
There's going to be a public access easement proposed, I believe, where the esplanade is, and then what's below it, which would be largely below the wall where the esplanade is, which is the Enrod area, pretty much, would have what the code requires is some sort of a protective easement, either conservation easement or a covenant that maintains the natural resource values in perpetuity, runs with the land, and that is signed by the owner, which would be, in this case, we'd have to figure it out because it's the Urban Renewal Commission. And that's part of the review that we'll be going through. And so,
Can you put it in a tract as part of the land
yeah,
division?
there's a lot of different options as far as what you do with that area. You can put it in a tract and, make that part of the plat. And that way it's identified But yeah, there's more than one way to do it.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of things have to still work out, but I'm going to ask the question. Usually when plannings are done, there's a 2-year maintenance agreement with the developers and so forth. And then after that, I presume falls back to the city. Is that right? The maintenance?
It depends who's designated as the easement holder, if it's an easement. And if that's the city, then yeah, it would be us. Or if there's another party that's going to be taking care of it, whether it's the on-site management or, that sort of thing, then it would be spelled out.
It's come to a point.
We don't know yet.
Who's going to be on the city side on the easement? Is it going to be under the Parks and Recreation?
Well, that's a good question because they currently maintain the River Trail area.
Okay,
And
here's
that sort of
something
thing.
I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
Parks and Recreation is terribly underfunded, as you know.
Absolutely.
And we have, I think we have the ability of setting up local improvement districts, which perhaps on the utility bill or however it's done, a small payment per unit could go into the long-term maintenance of that area. Because we got a lot of parks that are simply not, that are poorly maintained. The invasives moves in. The same thing's going to happen here. If it's not maintained in the long term. So if there was some mechanism where a devoted amount of money, it might be even $5 per unit per month, or not, maybe not even that, could actually, you could form a local improvement district. And since you all or whoever's doing this is a single owner at this time, that's the only person that would have to approve it. Has to have the approval of the property owners, but
Right.
in this case, there's only one
There's
property
only one that's 100%.
How's that?
If there's only one, that's 100% of all
Yes,
the
and
owners.
that's my point. So if you were
I guess
willing
you
to
have
form
the urban renewal
a
commission,
local
too.
improvement district for the long-term maintenance of the site, it'd be good. And I don't know if that's even come up as a discussion
Well,
point yet.
Yeah, I mean, local improvement districts usually form to front-end public infrastructure and then pay it back. I think what we're really talking about here is, a maintenance agreement, but how it's paid for, I think, is a discussion that the Urban Renewal Commission probably needs to have, and maybe they already have had. I'm not party to that yet.
Yeah, there is a development agreement. And
Okay.
I'm not sure if this is part of that agreement or not.
Okay, yeah, that's something to look into.
I would have to imagine that maintenance would be in it. I believe that it is, but I'm not sure what the details are.
And, yeah, getting back to the 2009 approval, which was the original water resource decision by the Planning Commission, I'll talk to Tony Conkle and see what what conditions were attached to that approval as far as what they anticipate.
But this is specific to this site, though.
Yeah,
The 200 foot still applies to the streams.
right, yeah. So outside of the project area,
Well, if that
elsewhere.
orange is showing there the 50 foot and that's the actual distance, I'm wondering, it looks like the spit has maybe 50 foot on the riverside. And I don't know if that's intended or
I don't
not.
know, is that right, John?
I'd be concerned about that.
I can check that. I'm not
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
What's the inroad up here?
So it looks as narrow as the area along your development area, and I'd be very concerned if that 200 foot buffer was removed from the Clackamas River.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we can check on that. It doesn't look like it, to be honest. Look at this up here.
Yeah, up there, I was looking at the spit portion. It looks real narrow there
Right.
at the.
Mr. Stewart, do you represent the natural resource concerns of this project, or what are you?
I'm a project manager for the development company that's
Oh.
building the apartments.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, I've never met you before. I'd like to talk to you sometime, but All right, so.
Actually, you
in
and
a
I met
nutshell,
at John Runyon's office about a year ago.
Do you work with John?
I wouldn't say I work with John. I know John and have had a couple of meetings with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in summary, I mean, I'm just asking for clarification. All the cottonwoods on the east side are going to go away.
Correct.
But most of those and other associated kinds of plants, understory, which are some on the peninsula, will stay.
That's
And then coming around the Main Street loop, shall we say, there's not too many cottonwoods there, but there's some. And when you get over to Lot 1, there's a lot. And there used to be little.
yeah. So nothing will happen over there.
Okay. Until you figure out what you're going to do with that lot.
Yeah.
And by the way, for the committee, this Lot 1, which is in the lower left-hand portion of the picture, was so difficult, they thought, to build on because you have to build it up the height of 99E. You'd have a pyramid there almost by the time you got done. That the thinking a year ago was that it would be some kind of mitigation habitat, wetlands or whatever, maybe a borrow pit.
Yep.
I didn't hear anybody say anything about the North Park. My understanding is the North Park is not a park anymore, the same kind of park.
Are you talking about the North Park?
North Park is way up on the top where the triangle comes together. There was to be a park up there, and I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, my understanding,
It was an amphitheater. Is that what you're talking about?
amphitheater and so forth, is that's being considered now because of the grade changes that were made and all that to keep it more of a natural walking trail area or something? Is anybody know?
So the North Park was taken out of the development agreement between the developer and the city.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that a little closer to the mic?
So the North Park was taken out as a required infrastructure as part of our development agreement between the city and the Urban Renewal Commission.
Now, that's part of your cut and fill operation, right?
You know, we weren't really doing a whole lot of grading in the North Park. Most of the grading that is occurring is south of the North Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was the area that you encountered so much contamination, all sorts of stuff, right? When you guys are digging to get material, somebody for phase 1.
Oh, I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard stories about how there. I think the contamination was
Right.
phase 1, which was to the south, kind of near that shopping center on the other side.
Yes.
And where the roundabout is.
Yes.
Yeah, they came across some bad soils, my understanding.
Right. So I guess my reason for asking that question, if it's not going to be an active recreation park, is it going to be trails and interpretive areas or?
To be honest, it's city property, so we don't know what they intend to do with it.
All right.
It's up to them at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But that part is also owned by the Urban Renewal District.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
I thought it was interesting in your report, John, the table 2, where you talk about the corridor functions and values associated with the proposal, we talk about water storage and delay, sediment stabilization, terrestrial habitat support, aquatic habitat support, and native plant diversity. I just thought that was a good overview of what the potential is when you grade back the banks.
Oh, yeah.
And
It'll be a lot better for sure. Yeah.
there's also in the materials, the report from John Runyon from March of this year about the feasibility of habitat restoration approaches, which is more of a broader overview. So,
Any more questions?
Is there a way to get a copy of this? It's very interesting.
The presentation?
Yes.
If you can copy it, yeah.
yeah, sure.
It'd be great.
I already
Great.
got a copy of it on the
Yeah,
computer.
just a lot more detail than we've had in the past because you're getting into the nuts and
For
bolts of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The report was actually, you had a link to it too, so a lot of these came from that report.
Oh, okay.
You should, yeah.
Okay.
Right, wasn't there a link?
Yeah, it's part of the agenda, but the
Yeah.
the PowerPoint presentation we can also send you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Earlier, I was on the commission when the urban renewal district decided to purchase the property, so that was a long, long time ago. And I'm so pleased that finally something is coming out of that effort.
Yeah, I agree.
What's the current condition of that North Park parcel or whatever you want to call it?
Up in here.
Yeah, what's the condition of it? Bare ground?
Yeah, I believe
Weed
it's
patch?
bare ground. I want to say there was some grading that took place with phase one in that area, and also some stormwater infrastructure that was put in place.
So was there some erosion control work done with that?
I have to imagine, at least while work was going on, I would have to imagine.
I mean, it was seeded or they just,
They seeded it.
yeah?
They didn't. seed it.
Okay.
It's just a gentle and less than gentle swale.
Right.
It has some real hummocky terrain. And they stayed away from the edge, the riparian edge, because they need to get the soil, they thought, from someplace else. So any of the stormwater that happens in that basin tends to stay in it, when I'm able to see it. But
Yeah, it's designed to stay in it, correct?
okay. Yeah.
And what the thing I was going to come to was that when different concepts of this development were coming through, one of the concerns was that any boats in the area would create wakes or waves. Is there any restrictions that you're putting on that the boats cannot? Are there any restrictions in terms of the boat use?
I don't think so. I've never heard of that.
I've never.
No, this was an early development that came before
Yeah,
us at the urban renewal, and our concern was
Yes.
boats going too fast in the area.
Sure.
And, you know, if there was a way for people to row out or something else out of the cove, but if somebody is going too fast, creates waves, some of those banks are pretty steep and might have some issues with it. And so I don't know if there's anything that can be considered in terms of wake-free use, boat use of the facility.
Yeah, it hasn't been discussed to date, and to be honest, I don't see any harm in that.
Well, boats that are in there could create the wake, but boats can't get in there.
Right.
Unless the water is about 10 feet higher than, 5 feet higher than today, basically.
Right, so right now it's kayaks mostly and
Yeah.
canoes, yeah.
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 Yeah, historically, it had a much different, thought. I mean, the process, it was be a lot more focused on the in-water activities there, which I'm sure what you're thinking of.
Right.
But now it's scaled way back.
Right.
I mean, there's really nothing in water
So
planned.
you anticipate it'd be things like kayaks and rowboats and those kinds would be the kind of activities you expect to see
Yeah,
in
so
there.
we're kind of thinking there's small amount of retail space on the ground floor of a couple of apartment buildings. And kind of the concept is that you would have like a kayak shop that rents out kayaks, or you have a canoe shop that rents out canoes, and you walk down to the water and you put it in. Yeah.
Is there anything preventing you to have the kind of marathons they had for 2 or 3 years running then? Where they actually had bicycle, was it bicycle, jogging and swimming?
Yeah, the
Iron Man.
decathlon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Triathlon.
Well, I know they had to swim out of the code to get to the Clackamas Park. I'm not sure they could do that in the last few years because of,
No, they couldn't. No, they wouldn't have been permitted. That's why they dropped it, I think.
yeah.
But my hope is that somehow we can remedy that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's nothing to restrict public access to the water.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah.
Before we leave the subject totally, I'm going to speak in behalf of one of the previous members that when we were looking at this development and some other things, we talked about hoping to see a dark sky kind of overlay. In other words, down-directed lighting. And most of what you've done with phase one is down-directed. It really is nice. And I'm speaking for Shaw Spady, who's
Yes.
not here.
Yes.
Who really want to see the city adopt an overall ordinance. Well, that may be more than what's needed, but the question here was, in your design work, would you consider down-directed lighting wherever possible to keep a dark sky kind of attitude there? It is a beautiful site.
Yeah, any lighting that we have is going to be shielded and directed towards walkways and wherever they're actually needed, where light is needed. I mean, there's no reason to spill the light beyond, say, the Esplanade or anything like that.
Some of these LED systems, they illuminate the microparticles that we didn't even know were in the air. And create a haze.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for for other people. But I think that would be neat if we could see this project relate a dark sky sensitivity. Even though there's nothing necessarily down there except the wildlife, which would probably benefit from it,
Sure.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, the Esplanade's really quite a distance from the downward bank there. And we do have lighting along the Esplanade so people can walk at night along the Esplanade. But yeah, we haven't done a detailed lighting study to date yet on what those photometrics would look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
The diagrams that I saw when I attended the Urban Renewal Commission meeting, they indicated landscaping, but there's no detail to it.
Right.
You obviously don't have the detail at this time.
It's just pretty pictures.
You'll within that 50-foot area, you'll be planting indigenous material. I was wondering whether that planting of indigenous material could extend on into the area west of the actual buildings.
Area west.
So it'd be like, could you put it here, for instance?
Right. Whether consideration could be given to having actually indigenous material used there too.
So are you saying take the same quantities and spread them out, or are you saying add more?
Actually, I'm talking about a bigger area.
So I'm not sure what the landscape plan looks like.
Right.
And maybe that includes natives. I'm not sure about that.
It does. There's quite a bit of landscape going on both sides of the Esplanade, in addition to what we have going on with the
And I
NROD
was wondering if
boundary.
native material could be used in that area as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you speaking of Agnes Avenue too? In your
I
thinking?
wasn't just speaking of Agnes. I was just talking about closer to the cove. Internally, I guess I'm a little less concerned about that.
Agnes Avenue is on the east side of your
Yeah.
condos, townhouses.
Yeah, and I was considering it along the cove area.
Right.
Three years ago, Multnomah County Corrections came in, and that was after I'd walked it with a whole bunch of people. I don't know if you were with us or not, Doug, but looking at these huge shrub communities of wild rose and things like that, it was just full of habitat. But it had messes too. Well, Multnomah County came in, cut it all down. Everything on the slopes of 205 they removed. I think it's trying to regenerate now, but it was just a beautiful thicket that would have, without having to be planted by somebody else, could be enhanced. And Agnes Avenue is a beautiful walk. I mean, if you get the junk out of there, there's a lot of junk over there right now. I took some people on a tour this weekend, Rocky Smith and Rachel.
You're talking about the old Agnes.
Yep, and then went into all these back areas and so forth, and there's 21 tents and homeless camps in there. They used to be on the other side by the River Resource Museum, but we cleaned that all up. There's nobody over there, but there's 21 camps there now.
Well, the old Agnes is not part of their area, is it?
No.
Not at all.
Nope.
No, I don't think so.
Make a great community project. then.
Well, the thing is, the property owners there, it's not the Urban Renewal District doesn't own it.
Oh, okay.
It's the county west. They're
Is it
waste-
county land?
Yeah, environmental services.
And then there's a private ownership of that one building that's
Right.
there, and so that's not Urban Renewal
Okay.
District.
All right. I didn't know.
Right.
That. Well, make a neat community project.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there'll be a new Agnes.
Yep, New Agnes, ending at the roundabout there.
Is there any potential for it to go through the west facility?
It is actually.
But can it for public, or is it going to be?
It's going to be a fire emergency access only
Yeah.
through their property. They didn't want a whole bunch of public traffic going through their property. So that extension that you see heading east from that roundabout. That is not happening with the first phase. The county is updating their master plan for their facility, and so where the configuration of that road is to be determined. Right now, it's just kind of a placeholder.
Any more questions? Well, I appreciate you
Thank
gentlemen
you.
coming
Yes,
here.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank
I'll
you.
probably be making comments as things go forward
Yeah, sure.
in the process. Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much.
Yeah, we'll into the grand fir and the buffer area, the end-rod width too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll safely eject this.
All right.
Let's see.
We have no public comments unless you gentlemen want to come up and talk about something else.
There you are.
Thank you so much.
All right, I gotta fill out one of those forms.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I've got one for John, so just go ahead. Good to go, though. Easy. Yeah.
I think the first thing under, oh, excuse me. Yeah, at our last meeting, we had a presentation of, I guess you would say an applicant, they're forced to be an applicant, dealing with an area, a dock easement on property across the railroad tracks from where their property is, and they had a dock easement through that area. And they were, no bounds cut and fill ever happened at that location, and no mitigation work ever occurred at that. And we heard it there. We made several comments at that time about the area, particularly in terms of the mitigation planting. The issue was that the requirement at that point was that they would do mitigation planting on their particular site. Well, a whole bunch of boulders and fill there at the river and so forth. I think there'd be almost no guarantee that it wouldn't be washed away in a flood or would have a hard time being established on a permanent basis. And we commented to that. I went to I was not aware it was going to be at the next Planning Commission meeting, but I went to that and testified to that effect, indicating it would be problematic. That area you see in the blue circle is the dock in question. And this was at the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission actually, staff made recommendations, partially based on, I think, on the input that we had and the property owner that was there, that mitigation plantings could be done elsewhere. They would be required to do 15% of their mitigation along that dock area. But they'd be dealing basically with the material that's already there. That is, things we knew that it got established, they could survive there.
Yeah.
Spirea was the specific one that came up. They would do invasive removal off-site to north of there. Can we go back to that map?
Yeah, sure. This one?
Yeah, that's the one. Where's the one with the blue circle on it? Yeah. They'd be doing invasive removal to that area, I presume is a vegetative area to the north of the site, so off-site invasive removal. And then their mitigation on planting was going to be actually occurring on waterways that pass through the cemetery where the land is in need of a lot of work, Scattering Canyon being one of them. And did I correctly kind of summarize?
Yeah, I think you did, Doug. I mean, the applicant proposed doing off-site mitigation because of the difficulty of putting plantings in this location due to the rockiness of the bank and the fact that it was subject to flooding. And so they proposed off-site mitigation through fee in lieu. So basically what they'd have to do is they have to have a consultant put together a plan for what it would take to plant a similar amount of material in Newell Creek Canyon, and then calculate the cost of that. And the city will require 120% of the cost of that as fee in lieu of planting. So there was quite a bit of discussion. So this is the slide that Kelly provided that shows the cemetery area, which has got the Newell Creek. And I think that Scattering Canyon, correct me, Doug, if I'm wrong,
That's right.
is around this area.
Where's the mausoleum? That's the mausoleum.
Yeah, that's the mausoleum.
Yeah, so that's Scattering Canyon there is
Yeah.
that loose stretch.
And then they would just enhance plantings there when it makes sense to do so. But we don't have a proposal prepared by a professional yet, and that's one of the conditions. So they need to follow through on that.
So it'll be a
and-
mitigation effort that would be far better guarantee of a success than anything that they would be required to do on site.
Correct. Yeah.
And we had brought that up at our last meeting.
What amount would the fee be?
Well, yeah. We don't know yet.
You don't know
Yeah,
yet?
because they have to prepare the
Okay.
plan.
Yeah.
But there's a 20%, well, you have to explain
A lot of
that.
discussion about why, well, the reason that we would require more than 100% is because prices change over time, and it's probably going to cost more in the future to do the project than it is now.
Okay, that's the reason.
Yeah, they didn't really explain that.
No.
So,
Well, I don't think the applicant understood that.
yeah, well, yeah, maybe not, but, yeah, the code, the NROD code does require financial guarantee, but it does not specify the amount. And so we looked at the other types of performance guarantees that are required in the development code, and one was 150%, and that was for hard infrastructure like pipes. And then the next one was 120%, which seemed to be reasonable. We also required, based on input from the Planning Commission, and I think from the NRC as well, increasing our tree mitigation fee to 150% of the current fee for the same reason, because you don't know what it's going to cost.
But that is
In
not
the
what was
future.
required of this applicant.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's 120% as they've written the condition. Yeah.
I'm going to make a comment about Scattering Canyon. There's a pathway that goes along the northern boundary of that piece of pathway that goes down. And within the cemetery boundaries, there's a sag area that it's dropped at one point, and there's 4 or 5 sag ponds in there, and it's a kind of an environmentally interesting area, and that's never going to be used for a cemetery because of the slopes and so forth. So if you haven't been down there, it's worth taking a trip down there. It's called Scattering Canyon because people take ashes down into this area and scatter them. And there are these memorial stones that people put up where they have indicated who it was and so forth. Really, really nice area, and it's well worth going down to if you ever have a chance to. Public Works is going to be working on this area because during heavy stormwater events, it has incised that stream, Scattering Canyon stream. It's incised a great deal, and Public Works in this coming year is going to actually be doing a lot of work to improve that habitat and to have it function better as a stormwater quality system. So that's something that's happening. That's a
Wasn't there a lot of wetland plantings established there a few years ago?
nothing I'm aware of.
No. Richard
there's-
Craven, I think, was he involved in trying to do something?
There is a plan that Martin Montalvo put together with, I think, input from Richard.
But
And- and
that's
Pedro.
coming up. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of what they're going to be doing.
Right, right,
That's been
right.
done.
All right.
Yeah. So there's some wetland plantings in that, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure there is. Actually, the plans haven't been done.
Okay.
They have to do the design portion first, and
Oh,
that has
okay.
not happened.
So the blue boundary or the blue area represents what?
The streams.
Well, the
Stream core.
blue, the big blue boundary is the natural resource overlay district.
Okay.
That's adopted on the city map.
Oh, I see.
And in the blue area, you actually have two colors of streams there. And that's an older stream layer and a more recent stream layer that actually follows contour lines. So we have two stream layers in the GIS. I think the lighter colored blue is the less accurate one.
Is the less accurate one?
Yeah, the one that's more wiggly is the more accurate one.
And this is a 200-foot setback, is that right?
Yes, because it drains into Newell Creek and then you have slopes. So a tributary to Newell Creek that drains a certain amount of area has a 200-foot setback. And because of the slopes that are in the canyon, it goes farther. It goes as far as 200 feet, yeah.
No, our general setback would be 50 feet on these streams because you're not in bearing streams. But
What's interesting here is the upper wetland that's indicated on the local wetland inventory. I don't know what the condition of that is,
yeah, I don't either.
or even if it's there. But that may be from a much older national wetland inventory. It'd be good to know. Another reason for updating the watershed wetland boundaries. So the slideshow is pretty long, but they just went into more detail on why we accepted 120% for fee in lieu, and then we recommended that the riverbank itself have a certain amount of plantings. What did they say? Minimum amount of additional plantings along the riverbank, 15 to 30% additional with species selected by the applicant's environmental professional, and allowing substitution of shrubs for trees as appropriate. And in terms of the flood overlay, they worked with Public Works to get an agreement on balance cut and fill. So they're going to do balance cut and fill by excavating off-site within the floodplain, 12 cubic yards.
The 12 cubic yards had to do with the dock?
Yeah. Not the dock, no, the concrete patio that was put in.
And rocks.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and the gravel and the rocks and the various other things.
I'd like to meet the scientist that could measure the difference in the Willamette River.
Yeah. Well, I think the standard requires no net fill ultimately. So the balance, that's probably.
I was going to tell Jerry on that last cove thing, you can dredge all day, every day. You can't fill.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Good point.
Dredging all day at the
Well, I didn't
entrance
see
won't
on
solve the
that.
problem.
So was
That's
I
right.
wrong that they were doing invasive removal at the?
That's always a requirement.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the off-site piece I was talking about.
Wherever the impact area is, or as close to it as they can do it, they have to remove invasives. So
So, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I don't understand this.
what's that? The fill?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not an engineer, so hang on.
So apparently when they built that thing, they actually did some filling from outside, so that was never balanced. And they, of course, were the previous property owners, wasn't this group. And so, even though it's not a small amount, the point is you might have a lot of small property owners that are
Cumulative
doing
effect,
things eventually that
Yeah.
might add up.
Right.
The point is, if you've got a regulation, unless you can get it exempted in some way through a process, it's not only the city's requirement, it's the metro region's requirement.
Well, FEMA too. So, yeah, the revised condition written by Development Services is written here. So they have to provide a grading plan that documents how much they did and any new balance cut and fill within the flood management area. The difficulty is the ownership of the easement by the Kanema Club, which is a group of owners who have access across this strip of land to the river and where that could occur. So that's what they agreed on.
So they're going to have to haul dirt out of there?
I honestly don't know if they're excavating or filling. You remember Doug? Yeah.
Because the railroad's not going to be easy to work with.
No, I think, no, I recollect. Behind where the bank is still in the floodplain. So that's an area controlled by the city in the public right-of-way, and that's where they would do the mitigation, which was what Development Services came to agree with. Yeah.
I don't think the issue would be if they cut and had to fill in. I mean, it's a case of if you're gonna. The idea is, of course, not to change the net capacity of the waterway. So if stuff that was cut and taken out of there originally, they would have to fill it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be the function of the purpose of the requirement.
Yeah. Well, I can get back to you. I'll talk to Josh Wheeler about that and see what they.
So I wasn't here when you looked at this, and so I'm slightly in the dark. How much of this had to do with the dock? How much of it to a patio?
Very little to do with the dock because that was in the water. It had to do with the on-land part of it.
And
Yeah.
the dock is a private dock,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
For private purposes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see docks rimmed with wetland plant edges in baskets. I'm serious, because that's what log rafts used to do.
Yeah. Well, who would be the agency to require that? It would be.
Well, you probably wouldn't want to, but it'd be neat to see houseboat,
It would be great. Yeah. That would be
Begin to
great.
create some habitat values, because some of the best habitat used to be along the log rafts and things like that were left there for a long period of time. I'm not the best,
Yeah.
but good habitat for.
Well, a comment
East
from Planning Commissioner Maybe, who was ill and couldn't be at the meeting, was, the dock actually provides much needed shading of the water because there's no vegetation.
Oh, that's true.
there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
skylights.
He made that the decision, they did a continuance of the planning commission. Commissioner maybe made that point at the first one. He wasn't able to attend the continuance.
Okay.
The next thing I'd like to bring up would be the wording and the ordinance.
Yeah. Let me find that. Let's see. Oh, not there.
What I'm bringing up is the code change that recommends that applicants come to see us when they're doing things in the NROD.
Wow, neat.
Okay. As I read that, you'll say, any advice is encouraged for input, whether or not any advice given by the Natural The applicant is encouraged.
The applicant's encouraged to contact the Oregon City Natural Resources Committee for input and advice on ways to further the purpose of the Natural Resources Overlay District, whether or not a development application is proposed within the Natural Resources Overlay District. Any advice given by the Natural Resources Committee is non-binding on the applicant and the Natural Resources Committee and shall not relieve an applicant from compliance with this chapter.
Okay.
I think we were trying to kind of do it like with the neighborhood associations where they have to present, just get it out there.
I don't have, I guess I don't have any problem with the wording of this. We don't have anything like it, and that's what the amendment's going to do. But I just wanted to take one more look at it.
In addition to that, we would add this similar language to our pre-application conference notes. For any application that's in or in the NROD or near the NROD.
That'd be good.
Yeah. That way they're given that prior to application, the potential.
Yeah, it's not a surprise to them.
Right.
So the one thing that, we changed was to have the public change the applicant, and that wasn't an issue. So I think this wording is satisfactory to us.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
Great. So actually, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about later.
Do you want to do it now?
Yeah, so I guess we're on the communications then.
Well, I'm calling it old business.
Oh, old business. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the code amendments, which is largely housing code amendments, have been continued to January 16th City Commission. We have 2 new commissioners coming on board, and they would like to look at the recommendation the Planning Commission made and look at some of the chapters in more detail. So we're going to be looking at it again.
What's the date again?
January 16th is the continuance date, but we do anticipate it's going to go into February, March.
Yeah. Okay. This is just a small piece of it.
Yeah. So while we have a recommendation from the Planning Commission, we did do a lot of work on documenting what was being changed and why. We want to do the same thing again with the City Commission. It's a huge, and the reasons given, it's just such a big, complex amount of code changes and not all of it has to do with housing. Some of it changed towards the end and has to do with recommendations that the Natural Resources Committee and the Planning Commission made with respect to tree policies in the annexation areas and needing to look at that on a more detail. Food carts, shelters for the downtown area and where those ought to go. The feeling was that there had not been enough public vetting or public input on those things that were brought into the code in the latter part of the public hearing process. Even though those were, things that came out of the public hearing process, we wanted to cast a wider net and get further input from the public at large. So I think those are all good reasons. We shouldn't rush to adopt something when it's going to have long-term ramifications for the entire city. So yeah, we'll be looking at this again. And for the time being, this version that's online is November 26th is the most current version, which is posted on the internet. So get that out of there. Let's see.
And what I wanted to do then was talk about my report to the City Commission. And
Did you want me to pull that letter up?
sure.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm going to go back in and get that again. I'm not sure I have the most current version, actually, Doug. Do you want to just talk about it?
Yeah, I'll just talk about it.
Okay.
That'll be fine. On the issue that has come up before us, of course, is the wetland originating with the Kanema delineated stream that occurred and for which there was no delineation. We brought this up at the last meeting, and I'll just read the ending sentence that I put in here. The planning department has sought grant opportunities to renew and update our Enron overlays, but has not yet been successful. The the planning department sought grant opportunities to update the Enron, but been not successful. The Natural Resource Committee still desires code changes that would permit the establishment of a temporary wetland area overlay when a new delineation is made or a previous overlay was found to be in error. The permanent overlay could be established when resources are available to determine its appropriate boundaries. That's a recommendation that we put forward. The question that I have is to do this in a more formal fashion where we actually vote on these kinds of things when we put it into put anything before the city commission. And we really haven't been formal enough, I think, in our efforts when we've made these kind of recommendations.
Right.
And I think we have to take formal action. I'm not suggesting do tonight, of course, but formal action on these things, and I've got other things that I'm going to bring up, in order to get it before the city commission and for a dialogue at that place. Good. The other thing had to do with the heritage tree designation and the issues to put it forward. I say the NRC still requests the upcoming budget cycle the city commission consider for funding a part-time arborist position to assist in this effort, as well as to deal with other tree issues on city property and public rights-of-way. To offset the cost of part-time arborists, consideration should also be given to revise our code so as not to require such a detailed arborist study, because the owner of the property, there's an edit, having a diseased or unsafe heritage tree is permitted to remove the heritage tree under the current code. And so we had talked about the requirements being a little bit more challenging. When I had the tree on my previous property declared a heritage tree, I just had to pay, I think, a $5 fee. It didn't require an arborist to do anything. And so I read that in there. And although I don't think, I think at the next meeting, we ought to maybe even vote on this. So when the city commission is going through their goal setting process, we can actually have something that's been formally approved by this body.
Yeah.
The other thing, was the geological designation of Waterboard Park as a geologically significant area.
Good.
I talked about that, but I think we need to formally make the request to the city commission to permit us to explore this.
Okay.
And so then I think that needs to be done in a formal vote. So when I go there, it isn't, we've had issues with neighborhood association representatives coming before this, speaking for the neighborhood association, and it turned out they weren't really speaking for the neighborhood association.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know why I don't put myself in that position. And so these kinds of things, I think we need to go ahead and formally do.
Good. I'm glad you did that. It was 3 years ago, we were bringing that issue forward about Waterboard Park.
Yeah.
You know, and Dr. Burns told us how to do it.
Yeah.
But we haven't,
We haven't.
we didn't know who would do it.
Yeah, we don't know, and we could take it on as long as we had
Love to do it.
the city commission giving us the permission to do it, and
Sure.
that's what we'd be requesting.
Right.
And then the other thing was, we understand the planning commission will be recommending developing code requirements dealing with tree removal prior to annexation and development proposals. And I said we supported that
Yes,
position.
absolutely. Very good.
So those are the major things I put forward at the report. And I see I should edit this and get another copy to you.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because, we probably want to put it in the record for the planning
Now,
commission.
I'm going to
city
go to the
commission.
first item, Pete, and would like you to, I think Laura wants to go ahead and proceed with the updating of the overlay districts, and the funding hasn't been there to do so. I would like you to explore with Laura, maybe invite her to come discuss the possibility of having the code revised to permit establishment of temporary wetland overlays when these things come forward. And I don't know if that's a possibility, but I would like, I'd like to see if she can come forward and talk to us about this issue.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
You probably
ask
know
her.
what she would say.
Well, I think it's great that if she can come, that'd be great, because then we'll have more people in the room to talk about it. And then I know there's some legal stuff that has to deal with, you have to have an adopted map in order to apply it when people apply, and so if you have kind of a moving target, that becomes legally.
This would still give us the opportunity for Laura to tell us how she's going to proceed in this effort. I know she wants to, and what actions are going to be taken.
Yeah, I mean, practically, the issue only comes up when you've got a wetland that's not touching the NROD. Any other time, if it's partially touching or within, then the NROD boundary comes around the new slightly modified location of the wetland that we know about.
Or the delineated stream is
or
been
that.
badly,
Yeah.
has been from the wrong.
So 90% of the time, you probably catch it anyway, but it's those 10% that it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, that's what we need to talk about. Yeah.
Anyway, those are the items I presented in my report.
This last one, you're talking about temporary wetland overlay, kind of in response to the Kanema debate?
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's going to run its course, but in case something else comes up.
Right.
Yeah, trying to
Not
find
only
if
that.
there's anything new out there or something
Right.
that's changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I like the idea. Yeah.
Because what was it, 99? Was that the last inventory?
Yeah.
There was some date. I remember
Yeah,
you guys talking
1999 was
That's right.
Shapiro and Associates, and then
Yeah, I mentioned the date and so
Okay,
forth
yeah.
in the.
we actually had a conversation with a lady, Jevra Brown from the Department of State Lands, came down and talked to planning staff last week. And the Department of State Lands is putting together a online mapping of all known local wetland inventories, but they don't have it graphically that you can just access like we do on our city GIS. And they also want to have on that all of the delineated wetlands that they've accepted as well, so you could see those, like the one in Kanema. But that won't be ready till, I think they're shooting for 2019 to get a draft
doing
going.
this?
Department of State Lands. And it's called the State Wetland Inventory Database, basically. And it'll be online and accessible by the public. And so they came to talk about that. And they also came to talk to us about the process for notification to DSL, which was never very clear. They do have a process for notification by local government planners where you consult your local wetland inventory, and any development proposal that's in or near any wetland that's on your adopted LWI, you upload that application to them. Now, we were doing that informally via email, and we'd send it to 3 or 4 staff people at DSL, but we were never sure what was happening because we never got any responses back. Now it appears that there's a lot more formalized process, which is going to be good. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we go into our communications?
Sorry, go ahead.
Anything from you, Pete?
No, I don't have anything further for communications.
Yeah, we had no new business before us. I'll have a recommended agenda item for next month, but, so we'll go ahead and go to our communications. Anything from Pete?
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the NRC applications that we've had so far. We had 2 applications, one from the gentleman you met who spoke to us at a previous meeting, and also one from Paul Edgar. As you know, the mayor decides who to appoint. We are extending the application period. So I sent out an email last week to anybody I knew that was interested in the NRC, including older members. And I think I gave a deadline at the end of December to apply. So
How about the neighborhood associations?
all the neighborhood association chairs and vice chairs and the CIC chairs and vice chairs as well. Plus the development community and several consultants and wetland folks and Friends of Trees, et cetera, just to see if there's, so I'm beating the ground. We wanted to wait on the interviews until we get,
Yes.
Final.
yeah. So that's where we're at on that. And that's
How many seats are we trying to fill?
2.
2.
Yeah. Also, on the Friends of Trees planning event on December 1st, we got some numbers back. There were 172 individual volunteers, totaling 662 and a half volunteer hours, and 131 trees ordered. Some of the trees are replacement trees from previous years because they didn't survive, and Friends of Trees comes back and replace those. But Friends of Trees is going to review their final records and provide an updated number, but it was a well-attended event.
Yeah, Aditi and I were there, and anybody else?
Question I have was, is there more site-specific location?
For the
How do I
Friends
say
of-
this?
Well,
Of the proper species?
oh, well, that's a good question. That's a question I would have to ask Ian Bonham. But I'll be happy to ask him that.
Okay.
Well, what are you thinking about?
Well, McLaughlin, 3 or 4 years ago, and a lot of trees were put in McLaughlin neighborhood area. There are a lot of low branching trees. They're the wrong tree
Yeah.
for a street corridor. And I'm wondering if anybody's designing.
Well,
We will get a detailed report and it'll have all the species in
Okay.
it. So
Don't we have a street tree list?
We do, but we also accept any certified arborist recommendation.
Okay.
So if there are trees that are not on our list that are considered appropriate, and that does include a few,
But people can ask for a tree of a certain type.
they can ask for a street tree or a yard tree as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you know how many of the street trees are ending up,
I don't know
or vice
what,
versa?
I don't know what the breakout is percentage-wise, but that's something
Because it
else.
appears some
Yeah.
of the home trees are ending up in the right of way. That's all I'm saying.
Oh,
Flowering plums and stuff like that, real low branching
Huh.
crab apples,
yeah.
you wouldn't want there, probably.
Well, not if they're maintained, they're okay. I mean, there's a series of crab apple trees on the parking strip of Barclay Park.
Right, it's just a branching issue.
Yeah, and they prune the branches, and they look good.
Okay, I'm not opposed to crab apples, I love them.
Yeah.
But they're very broad
Yeah.
tree,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
But the requirement of the branching is the 8-foot requirement.
Okay.
So that has to be cleared out.
Okay,
And I'm saying this because I'm gonna get some crab apples next year.
Yeah,
But
right.
I'll keep them pruned,
We did get the question about, folks who did want fruit trees, and our recommendation was that, yeah, that's fine if Friends of Trees wants to sell them a fruit tree, but it would be preferable to put that in the yard because it's not
Okay.
appropriate for a street tree necessarily. But on the crab apples question, it might be a hybrid. I have to check with Ian and see
Yeah,
what
they
they're
would
talking
be.
about. Yeah. And then Tree City USA application is due to the Arbor Day Foundation by the end of the year, and we're about halfway finished. We got data from Parks and data from Planning. We just need the data from Public Works, and then we compile it and send it off to them. So I'll give you an update on that once that's submitted. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Mentioned at the last meeting, the stream naming activities at the Naturo that the Oregon City Watershed Council is entertaining. One of our board members, Richard Craven, who you know,
Yes.
he actually explored the process somewhat, and I intend to actually have it elevated really to a new business piece because of the next meeting, because I want to tell you what we're looking at, and would probably look for support from this group in terms of pursuing the stream naming effort, because the city commission would need to become involved in that particular process, and Richard Craven has identified the people that we would need to work with in that particular effort. He's pretty certain that the requirement would require First Nation peoples to be involved, and they would presume in that effort, at least to be informed of what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah. And we envision the Parks Department goes through a very formal process in terms of naming parks, and they got appoint committees, names are recommended. They appoint committees to go through there, and they make the recommendations to the city. We envision the stream naming would be on the same level, that it would go through a public process. We would hope to involve neighborhood associations where those streams are located to be involved in that process. Mm-hmm. And you referred to the stream going through Hillendale Park as what stream?
Dave Fish Creek.
I traced the map,
Okay.
and it actually is Mud Creek.
Mud Creek?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mud Creek is a fairly long creek. It actually goes through the county properties.
Okay.
Through
I know.
through there, and then it goes.
By Danielson's, he had a sign for several years saying Fish Creek. But
Yeah.
Dave Fish.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But it is actually a Mud Creek,
Okay.
Who's Dave Fish?
which is a formal name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my communications, and if you would, for the next, on new business, I'll speak to that issue next time.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Anybody else?
No, just,
Yeah.
adios.
Adios, amigo.
It's my last
We're gonna miss you,
meeting.
man.
You're going off this group?
Yeah, I am for a while anyway.
Did you not know that last thing we did at the previous meeting was to induct you for 10 years?
You know
Oh, we got those damn bylaws.
Those darn bylaws.
We had a secret meeting.
So you're going to be gone for temporary, or is it this
Well,
term?
no, this is the end of my term,
Oh,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna see how it goes. I might reapply in the future.
good. Very good. Good.
We'll accept your application at any point.
Thank you, and really appreciate working with all you folks.
Anything to speak to?
Oh, yes, sorry. I approached Rocky Smith, our incoming commissioner, and Rachel Smith, no relation, about would you like to take a look at some of the river assets and opportunity areas that we've been working on. I'd love to have anybody from this group attend our meeting. It's going to be in the 17th of January, but we've had about 12 meetings, and they're a quarter apart. In other words, 3 months apart. And now we're refining them more for looking at what mitigation funding might be available. Long and short of it was that there was a lot of misinformation in certain people's minds about the boat ramp in the park and what you could do with the boat ramp without impacting the park so much. And they had a chance to see that firsthand, including a standing wave, 5 feet tall, that's right in front of the existing boat ramp. And that existing boat ramp, it's about $500,000 were spent on, not of this city, I don't think, but by Marine Board to repair it. And now it's washing out those panels again. So there's a standing wave there now. And the kayakers last weekend were perched on it. I mean, it's the neatest thing they ever could have, creating a wave effect. But anyway, so they had a chance to see that and then see the massive rock bar that's on the Gladstone side, which has really changed the lower section of the river off of Clackamas Park. And look at some mitigation opportunities. Look at perhaps moving the RV park to higher ground. If you move the park south, it's 5 to 8 feet higher. 5 low, 8 high. If you put it out of the ordinary high water line, which is 25 feet, and that would put it at elevation 30 as a concept, and then doing some mitigation enhancement work in where the park, RV park is now, so forth. Then we went back in the cove, and that's where I didn't realize how many homeless camps are in there now. And really looked at things in detail and looked at the new condos, which are not condos, apartments, which are not complete with their landscape. So they need landscape work bad, but they're not to that point yet. And had a chance to really see things in the cove. The whole thing in the cove, it's a very difficult site. We know that, but we don't realize how difficult until you really see it. And then we saw the Neely Underwalk, we're calling it, which you would like to see and we would like to see. Our 2 box culverts are not. They're passageways for cows that were put under 205 as required when 205 was built. And the question was, could you use this for a passage through the cove to basically the end of the Oregon Trail, that area, series of wetlands that were built when
There's one under the railway too.
yeah, and they line up exactly with the one for the railroad. And there's been people talking about, well, my gosh, once we get through there, we need an overpass over the railroad. No, you don't. Go right through the passageways the cows were designed to take by that whole thing. So it was really an eye-opener to people. I thought it was good, but I'd like to at some point, maybe in the next couple months or something, come back with a little more formal presentation I could do from the dais with a couple people about the River Assets Group, because our whole mission is just getting people to see opportunities and then work towards getting some funding from other sources, mitigation money, which is available. And so.
My understanding is that John Lewis did explore that possibility, and neither ODOT nor Union Pacific were willing to do it. I don't know if they consider it's a liability issue or not, but it ought not to be if it's constructed correctly.
If it was good enough for cows.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know about if something falls in the cow versus something falls on the person. I think it's a little different, but they are. I mean,
Cows don't litigate.
well, they're all. The farmer might.
Well, they're quite high. They're 14 feet high.
Oh, yeah, they are.
And if you put a boardwalk even midway, you'd still have 7 feet of climb. They're almost 20 feet high. So, the deal I think they're concerned about is there's water down there. Well, there's a way to solve
Sure,
that.
yeah.
But,
No,
it'd be really nice to tie all this together.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it should be pursued. And it seems to me that's something we can.
As the Neely Thruway.
I like that.
But the point is, the big point is, we've got the Clackamas River Trail there, and then coming around the cove and so forth. It'd be ideal if you could get people beyond that and access other areas.
Right.
Getting the interpretive center and and other things.
Yep.
Anything?
No.
Well, Dee Dee's not here tonight, but I want to give her kudos. I went through Waterboard Park, I think a weekend or two ago. It's been a few months, but they've been doing some great work in there and great restoration work. So I just wanted to give her kudos.
Yes.
Good.
That's great work.
They've gotten rid of a lot of ivy.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, just get the word out about the applications and
Yeah.
if you can. So, thanks.
Okay.
All right.